In the 1950s, George Reeves embodied the Man of Steel in Superman's first television adaptation, from its gritty black and white beginnings to the kid-friendly color years. To this day, an entire generation reveres George as their Superman, while for others, the show remains an overlooked, underrated chapter in the character's history. On this podcast, we bring everyone together as we break down each episode of Adventures of Superman, examining it within the context of the series itself, as well as the larger Superman mythology. Welcome to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 5, Episode 2, Tin Hero, is returning guest, Rich Roney. Welcome back.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm happy to be here because we had such a blast last week. It was very, very energizing.
Yes. Well, this week we have Tin Hero, like I said, in which a meek man with a nose for news becomes the planet's crime-busting reporter. This aired March 14th, 1957, written by Wilton Schiller. That was the new writer I had mentioned last time, directed by George Blair. Guest cast includes Carl Ritchie as Frank Smullins, Paula Houston as Celia, Jack Lomas as Big Jack, and Frank Richards as Marty. So overall feelings about this one?
I'm going to give you my best discussion, but I got to tell you, Anthony, about midpoint on this. I just wanted this episode to be over.
Yeah.
I just wanted it to be over.
You know, I was thinking back on the first time I watched this, and it was a while back, but I remember reading the description and feeling like this had some comedic potential, right? Like this idea that this guy is very meek, but he comes away with this impression that he's busting up all of these crimes. And I thought, oh, okay, that actually could be interesting. The way it played out, unfortunately, didn't live up to my expectation. And I think there's a fundamental problem that exists in this episode, and I'm curious if this bugged you as well. We'll get into it more specifically as we always do, but basically, there are multiple instances where this guy is confronted with real danger and faints. When he wakes up, first it's Clark, then it's Superman, who convince him that he stopped the bad guy.
And even prior to that, Perry kind of convinced him. And when he had the yarn or
so the first one I can excuse, because what we see the events unfold. Jimmy's also there, and when Jimmy recounts it, his impression of events doesn't line up with reality. But that's what Perry is relying on. So I'm okay at that point. But then it starts to become clear to Clark/Superman that this guy is not this tough crime buster. Yet for some reason, both Clark and Superman continue. And then the climax of the episode as well is yet another instance of trying to convince this guy. And I'm like, even as at the same time, Clark is talking to Perry about hey, this guy isn't what we think. So he recognizes the problem, yet he's perpetuating it. I don't understand.
That's a good point.
Why?
I didn't pick that up, Anthony.
Oh, it drove me nuts.
I didn't pick that up. I had a hard time with this episode.
Yeah, and it's not the thing about this that's crazy to me is that it's not just, oh, you want this guy to feel good about himself. I mean, these are life or death situations. I mean, there's a point where Clark sends him to stop this pickpocket. And I guess, all right, maybe Clark knows this guy isn't actually dangerous. Maybe he's x-rayed him. But the guy turns out to have a gun. So it's I don't know. They're shoving this guy into these dangerous situations, continuing to make him think that he's doing all of these great things. I don't get it.
And then he starts believing his own press.
Yeah.
He starts really thinking he is this. Now, it made me laugh how Perry was so zealous, right? Perry must be desperate for a new reporter because this thing went off in leaps and bounds. Hey, this guy has a feeling for things. You know what? And he's going to be our new ace crime reporter, I know,
he makes this guy switch careers.
Right. And he's been a meek bookkeeper getting $45 a week for years. And apparently, 5 years ago, he gave his boss an idea that was never given credence. But now he's this two-fisted crime reporter for the Daily Planet. And Perry's telling him, go get him, boy.
I was going to save this for later, but since you mentioned the salary, I want to talk about this now. So yeah, so this guy, he was making $45 a week as a bookkeeper. Perry offers to double his salary, so $90 a week. But then Clark chimes in and Perry bumps it up to $100.
Right. But he's got a nose for news.
Yes. But so $100 a week, in today's dollars, if my math is right, it'd be about 1,100-ish. So just interesting to kind of give it the context. But my question is, what do you think Clark makes at the Daily Planet?
Clark must be doing pretty well because that sports car of his is elegant. That silver, two-door sports car, that he's doing a lot better than poor Lois for $10 for a hat.
Yeah, no, 100%. But because I was thinking about that, because Clark, well, none of them, I suppose, but Clark especially, he doesn't bat an eye at this figure. And like I said, even prompts Perry to offer more. So there's no way $100 even comes close to what Clark is making, right?
I would agree.
It can't. What do you think, like 200, 250? Or that's too much?
Clark doesn't have a lot of expenses. He's only got one suit, one shirt, one tie, right? He's got 3 Superman suits. I've never seen another business suit hanging in his closet.
Yeah, I know. But that was just interesting to me. All right, we'll get into our play-by-play. More stuff will come up as we go along here. At the Daily Planet, Perry barks about not having any good stories to print and sends Clark, Lois, and Jimmy out on roving assignments. Outside the bank, nebbish Frank Smullins is walking and making a cat's cradle with string when he hears gunshots. He puts his hands up in the air. The fleeing robber bumps into Frank, and they fall and get caught up together. Jimmy happens to be on the scene and gets photos. Anything about this opening that stood out to you?
You summarized it with great accuracy. Yeah, I agree.
I did. The only thing I have is, as I did like, as Perry's yelling at them, Clark, understandably, he's like, Chief, we don't make the news. So, but of course, Perry has his comeback about like crime hasn't been eradicated, right? Stuff is still going on. So, but it was interesting. Later at the Planet, Jimmy recounts the events differently, claiming that he saw Frank wrestle the robber to the ground and tie him up with rope. Perry chastises the Cub reporter for not bringing Frank in for an interview, but Jimmy produces the apparent hero. I liked this for Jimmy. I really like that because Perry's ready to, just bite his head off for not bringing the guy in for an interview. But Jimmy, he had him there. I like that.
Well
Good for
done.
Jimmy. Yeah.
Yeah, well done.
I know. You like to see that. Okay. Frank explains that he gets feelings when things are going to happen and has been on the scene for various newsworthy events. So what do you make of this? Do we just chalk it up to this guy just has a quote unquote nose for news? He has good hunches. Is there anything? I think the answer is no, but is there anything like any supernatural component? I mean, it's never addressed. It's never explained. It's just like he just happens to be in these places.
I can remember seeing this episode as a child when I was 6 or 7. And then I watched it now. And Anthony, I was just so turned off. I mean, I do remember the phrase that, he gets these feelings, I assumed like these are my words today, premonitions, like something's going on. But other than that being said, we never saw any evidence or proof of it or documentation of it. He just happened to be going for a walk at lunch when the bank was being robbed and he had the thread in his hands. I didn't see anything else that would substantiate him going, oh, I was, when there was this bus accident over here, I was there. Or I saw nothing to substantiate it. So I thought it was just, it's part of the story. I mean, part of this show.
I mean, he rattles off, I don't have the specific instances, but there are a few other examples he gives in The Office of things that he was present for. So
okay. I missed that.
I guess I bring this up because there's an episode we're getting to later this season that I absolutely loathe, but we had a fun discussion about it, or that people will hear. We're recording a little bit out of order here, but it's the close shave episode. And in that one, we have this barber who is able to convince people to do certain things, but it gets very convoluted where he has to believe it and the person he's talking to also has to believe it. So I don't know. But what bugged me about that is there was, it's never painted as being any sort of supernatural ability, but it almost has that feel because they could have made it like, oh, he's just got a great way with words, right? He's a great talker, but it's not that. Like he just says, oh, you would call the police if you knew something bad was going to happen. And the guy like gets up like he's in a trance.
Yeah. It almost in that episode, he was almost like Professor X. He had this he could telepathically convince someone to do something.
Yeah. So this here doesn't bother me as much because I feel like it's a lighter touch here. It's like, oh, he's got these hunches. It's like that. I can wrap my head around that more so than what we're going to see in the close shave. But it just, if I'm categorizing these episodes, like there is some commonality between those two in terms of these borderline supernatural abilities that are not explained at all. Like we talked about, Perry offers Frank a job as the planet's new crime-busting reporter at double his current salary. Frank explains he already has a job as a bookkeeper, but Perry insists. It's like, all right. Frank discusses this later with his girlfriend, Celia, who sees this as an opportunity, particularly since, as you were saying, Rich, Frank has been a junior bookkeeper for 20 years and continues to get passed over, his proposal going unread year after year. Did you like seeing the home life, the behind the scenes of this, or did you not care?
No, I thought it was intrinsic to this episode, right? I got the vibe that they've been going together for years. And the things that impressed me in this episode or stayed with me were, I saw it very, very reminiscent of some of the episodes of Andy Griffiths with Barney Fife, that he might be not super competent, but he has high thoughts and high aspirations. And then something can be done and he convinces himself that he's a lion and he can do stuff. So I saw this as, hey, this guy's getting his moment in the sun, right? There was a few moments when, to me, this was a tiny bit reminiscent of Lou Costello from Abbott and Costello. Just the way his physical makeup, the way he carried himself. That one scene when he's very confident when the guy's coming out of the safe. I was impressed with that, right? But then he fainted a microsecond later. So I saw this being reminiscent of some of the comedies of Mayberry RFD with Barney Fife. And I saw this being a little reminiscent of Lou Costello from Abbott and Costello.
All right, right on. Yeah, I didn't mind that we got this glimpse into the home life, especially because later Celia will be taken. So I'm glad that we at least we had met that character and we got a little more insight into what's going on. It's not the most compelling, but I didn't mind it. Meanwhile, Big Jack and Marty debate knocking off Frank, as the bank robber was part of their crew. Big Jack insists they follow his plan, i.e. to lull the city into complacency and then spring 20 big jobs in a row.
A little ambitious.
Yeah. Again, I didn't mind this either. It was intriguing that, okay. And then it ties back to the beginning. Like, there hasn't been much news to report because the underworld is purposely lying low because they're waiting to spring all these jobs. I like that.
And Perry's instincts, hey, crime hasn't stopped. And now we learn, okay, you know what? Apparently this one gang has 20 jobs in the hopper.
Yeah, exactly. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Moose has that rare old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. Visit them in Whippany or reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Whether you're an independent filmmaker or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals. Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. Single Bound is a new podcast hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is a regular topic of discussion. Listen and subscribe to Single Bound on Spotify and YouTube. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories? Robbo is that kind of person, and that's exactly what he's doing on a new show called This Podcast Will Never Die. Listen and subscribe today. If you have children and are looking for a family-friendly store, look no further than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, and check out awyeahcomics.com for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Aw yeah! My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Zach Moore's Always Hold On to Smallville, which continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts. Back at the bank, Clark and Frank observe a known pickpocket lift the wallet of the bank president. Clark insists that Frank confront the criminal, but Frank faints when Fingers Danny produces a gun. And Clark takes over. I don't know, a couple of things. I guess, though, this is now another instance of showing that Frank does have these hunches, right? He takes them back to the same place as the previous robbery, but he is right that we have this pickpocket there. I mean, what do you make of Clark encouraging Frank to the extent that he does?
I'm going to be candid. I'm only thinking about it now in response to your question. I really, again, I'm saying this for like the third time. I was watching this episode and I couldn't get over it fast enough. I just wanted it to end. But I'm wondering now that you raised the question, is this Clark kind of testing like, what is Frank Smollins really like? I mean, underneath, does he have confidence? Does he have the ability to do things, or is he really, really, really meek? So I saw this now in light of your question. I'm wondering, is this Clark trying to assess what this guy's real personality is?
Yeah, maybe. And look, in fairness, not to beat up on Clark or the show too much, it's like Clark was there. So obviously he could step in and did step in when needed. I guess the thing that go ahead.
I will say this, though. One thing that I thought was a quick assumption, this guy is pinpointed as a very effective pickpocket. How do you know that the billfold that Clark pulled out was really the bank? Could it have been another? Could he have gotten another wallet earlier in the day that he was just carrying around? I mean, I didn't see that immediate correlation that it was the bank managers or the bank officers' wallet. I thought that was a leap.
Yeah,
now, a plausible leap, given the fact that you have this studio with the front door of a bank and just two people on the street. Okay, plausible. But I thought, even though I watch it, that's kind of a leap.
I guess the other thing, too, that I wrestle with is, yes, I understand the idea of the crime-busting reporter, but because Frank says, like, should we call the police? And Clark was like, no. I mean, is that... I don't know. It feels like a bridge too far that, like, no, the reporter is going to physically apprehend the bad guy in the commission of a crime. I don't know.
In light of what you're saying now, and I commend you, Anthony, you're giving it more fresh set of eyes. Could Clark be trying to let Frank really see if this is really the life for him?
Yeah, I think there could. I think the generous but arguably reasonable reading of Clark in the scene is exactly that like he's giving this opportunity.
A test.
He's testing Frank a little bit, but also giving Frank an opportunity to test this life for himself. So I think, again, I don't know, it makes me laugh, I guess, how like he just shoves Frank into the situation. But yeah, I think maybe there's a bit of that internal calculus going on. At the planet, Clark begins to realize that Frank may be a tin hero after all, after analyzing Jimmy's photos more closely. I like this, right? Where he's talking to Perry, because again, we know what we saw and the fact that Frank didn't tackle this guy and tie him up. And Clark now is realizing
piecing it together. Yeah. And once again, Jimmy's hyperbole, he's so impulsive, right? So did Jimmy clearly imprinted his own expectations or his own view of things on this. It led Perry to go, this guy's my crime reporter. So I did like that Clark was deductive and analytical and kind of questioning things.
Yeah. Nevertheless, Clark explains to Perry that he convinced Frank he had apprehended Fingers Danny when Frank woke up. So this is where, again, I just say, why are we trying to convince this guy that he's more capable than he actually is in these life or death situations? Frank's next hunch leads him to a jeweler's where he faints again when Marty confronts him. Marty locks him in the safe with a stick of dynamite and flees, but Superman arrives in time to save Frank. When Frank wakes up, Superman inexplicably tells Frank that he did it again and scared off the thief. So if we can excuse the earlier instances, this is the point now where I'm really getting frustrated.
It's a bridge too far.
Because we've had the conversation with Clark and Perry where Clark's like, look, this guy isn't what we think.
But now he's emphatically reinforcing the wrong message.
Yep.
Now, the other thing that disturbed me about this, right? And you did the research, and apparently George Reeves did, I think, bang up his ribs. So he wasn't doing the physical activity as much as prior seasons. But when the dynamite comes out, Superman picks it up and throws it out the window. Whereas last week when we got together, we were looking at Peril in Paris, with the explosion there in front of Madame Constantine, he shielded, he protected her, he absorbed, he took the power of the explosion, he muzzled it. Why couldn't he do that here? That would have been a better display of his powers as opposed to just taking a stick of dynamite and throwing it out the window.
Wait, I'm blanking. What was the explosion in Peril in Paris?
Early on,
Oh, yes. I didn't even include that in my recap, but you're right. Yeah, and at the theater. There was yes.
Superman turned around and he muzzled the explosion to protect her.
Yeah.
So he could, and we've seen that in other things. We'll see that in some of the future episodes. He will absorb the force of the explosion with his invulnerable body. So I was disturbed, like, really? I mean, you could just as easily have had him, muzzle it in his chest or his stomach and have the explosion occur. I was disappointed with that.
I was just impressed they showed us the dynamite explode. I thought we were just going to get the sound effects. I was like, all right on. Big Jack and Marty take Celia hostage, but they get Jimmy on the phone, who pretends to be Frank. I liked this. I like Jack Larson pretending to be this other guy. And there's a funny bit where he asks for the address, and they're like, what do you mean? You don't know where
she's got two houses.
Yeah. And so like that was funny, but then Jimmy's pretty capable. Well, it cuts both ways. Jimmy totally misreads that initial scene at the bank that sets off all of these events. But he, like we said earlier, he brings Frank in for the interview, and then he has this moment of shrewdness. I like this, where he was able, she has two houses. Which one? I like that. But a very funny moment. Later, Lois shares the address she heard Jimmy talking about. Frank recognizes it as his girlfriend's, and they take off. And there's a little bit here, I don't know how much this stood out to you, about Clark making an excuse to Perry about why he can't go, like he's going to go chase down another lead or something like that.
I apologize. I forgot.
Rich really was like not feeling this episode.
Yeah, look,
I understand.
Look, when Frank confronted the guy in front of the vault prior to the stick of dynamite, I checked out. I was done. And you can hear it in the tone of the disdain in my voice.
All right, we'll bring this home here. Superman arrives at Celia's house first and knocks out the bad guys, then stages them on the couch with their guns pointed at a tied up Jimmy and Celia. And we mentioned this last week, but now we actually see it in play. When they're firing at him, we see the bullets bouncing off. It's a cool look. For all the complaints that I have about these episodes, they're almost never about the stunts or special effects, because I'm just always generally impressed with what they were able to pull off at that time, given the technology, how fast they shot these, the budget limitations. So, I thought this was cool. So I liked seeing that.
Amen.
Superman leaves. Frank and Lois arrive. Frank bonks the bad guys' heads together, unaware that they're already unconscious. Jimmy starts to talk and tell him he didn't need to do that, but Celia cuts him off so that Frank can have his heroic moment.
I like that. Her love and wants to bolster his confidence. I liked that.
Look, it's a nice moment, and certainly from Celia's point of view. I guess I don't want to continue harping on this. The one thing that I wouldn't have minded here, if Clark/Superman had gotten some indication from Frank that, hey, maybe this isn't my thing, this will be my last rodeo or something like that. And then he's like, all right, I'll give him this big moment at the end.
That's a beautiful sentiment.
Then I'm more okay with this. But instead, this just feeds into the larger problem I have with this episode, because this is now yet the third time that Clark or Superman has convinced Frank that he's doing all of these things. I mean, they're going to get this guy killed is my point. All right. At the planet, Frank and Celia announce that he's returning to his old job, as the boss finally read Frank's report and is giving him a long overdue raise and promotion, which means that Frank and Celia can get married at long last. Perry tells Frank to stop at payroll for a bonus or a wedding present, and Celia gives the chief a kiss on the cheek. And we're out.
And we're done.
Yeah. All right. out of 5 Great Caesar's Ghost, how many are we giving this one?
0.5.
Oh, all right. All right. Fair.
Oh, and one thing, it seemed that they tried to do in season 5 more than any other season, comedies. And there's a few episodes we're going to discuss over the next few weeks where I could really see the comedic lines in the script, but it was such a dud. And you, to your credit, were more attentive than me. You raised some brilliant points that Superman is reinforcing the wrong view of things. He's putting this guy in jeopardy by deceiving him or presenting a picture of something he's not. But I give this 0.5.
It's not more than a 1. Do I even go as high as 1? Or is this a 0.5? I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go with you and say 0.5. I'm hard pressed to say 1. There's not much that I can really look to here. I like Jack Larson on the phone doing the imitation. That's about it though. Yeah, 0.5 for me as well. If there had been some reason, some accounting for why they're bending over backwards to humor this guy, fine. I think there's another track they could have taken here where it could have been the case that Frank is actually stopping these crimes, but he's doing it accidentally.
Inadvertently.
I mean, basically like you see that's the funny thing about this episode, because what you see in that opening scene where he's, fumbling with his yarn, that's an accident. It could have played out like that over the course of the episode. That could have been funny. It's like he's continually doing it, but it's always, like he's tripping, he's bumping into something, he's not doing it on purpose.
That would have been impressive. That would have made it more interesting where, like you said, in the very, very, very first scene when we meet Frank, he accidentally stops it, right? If there had been a couple of other things where his I don't want to say ignorance, but if he accidentally took an action that had a good outcome, that would have been more of a comedic relief.
Yeah, I think that's what would have made a difference for me in this episode. I think that probably would have solved a good bit of this, because as opposed to him just constantly fainting, and it's like outside the bank in that opening scene, he heard gunshots. He was aware that something was afoot. He didn't faint there. He stood, right, and the guy ran in. So I think they could have gone down that road. But in any event, that's our episode here. We both gave it a 0.5. Look, there's a 0 coming in this season, and it's maybe not the one that people are expecting it to be, but there is a 0 coming from it. It's the only one that I expect to give in all of these episodes. All right. Thank you, as always, for joining me. So our pal Ed Gross is going to sub in next week for The Town That Wasn't. And Rich, you are going to be back in 2 weeks for The Tomb of Zaharan, or however we pronounce it, because they call it a couple of different things over the course of that episode. So we'll go with whatever makes sense to us.
I'm looking forward to it. All
right. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, audience. Keep tuning in. Until then, as always, only Superman can do super things. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. Another way to support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, is by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please subscribe, rate, and review today via your podcast platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Flat Squirrel Podcasts is also home to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey, a long-running weekly series mining Superman's vast mythology across time and media. Subscribe today. Another exciting episode is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Greg Schiegel and theme music by Dan Pritchard.